Living Rent campaign in Brighton, and we are non-partisan, political or anything, but we are fighting, campaigning for living rent, fair rents, the end to buying social housing, right to buy, and regulation of landlords. We're campaigning strongly on that. I just think probably what we need to do is get involved with all of the groups, and I know that a lot of renter groups in London and the country are all doing their individual thing. And it would be really good if we could all get together and do that. And I'm just wondering how the People's Assembly is one way that does actually get people together, but I'm just wondering how we can actually go forward now, because I just see dire consequences from this party's the government that we've got in now. And I live in housing association property, and I don't want to buy it. I want it to be there for for people who are like me. When I needed it, I was able to get it. And I just don't see any future in this government wants to decimate social housing.
Well, I mean, if people want to get together, I mean, the prime responsibility is for themselves to approach other similar bodies and try and join up. And I agree, if you're going to have a political social movement, it has to be done on the basis of mass membership and involvement of huge numbers of people. I would like to think, of course, that the Labour Party will be assisting in this, and when I first was active in politics, that's actually what it did. It ran a lot of local campaigns. It was very effective. But as we've heard today from Ben, of course, that has absolutely radically changed. I mean, I think the huge change that has happened in this country in the last 30 years, since Thatcher and the Tory ideology of deregulated finance, market fundamentalism, privatisation, keeping the unions on a short leash. I mean, all of that is aimed to give power to a financial elite and to the corporate bosses. That's actually they who at this time are running Britain. So we are on a back foot. And I certainly think the state of the Labour Party in Parliament is desultory. I don't want to speak too ill of colleagues, and I'm sure there are plenty of good Labour MPs. I know there are. I would say there are at least 50 in the Parliamentary Labour Party who I would regard as certainly on the left, and I'm sure many of the new Labour MPs will. Now, we have somehow, out of this, got to turn just a bit of a second at the end, we've got to turn the party round and to listen to pay attention to, and to assist those who are active on the ground, because that's when things happen. Parliament and the Labour Party doesn't lead change; it follows it, and we've got to be very active, I think, in trying to assist in this amalgamation and the difference of creating a mass social political movement within the Labour Party. It isn't going to be done at the leadership level, it isn't going to be done at Parliament, but what we are trying to do, and I'm certainly involved in this, is precisely to get this group of at least 50 Labour MPs to offer their services, to go round the country, not just to talk or blather, but if people want them to assist in what is a burning issue locally, whatever it is, to take part. That is what I think needs to be done. It's a long haul, but it's the only way, I think, in which we're going to get fundamental change.
Hopefully they'll support the Living Rent campaign in Brighton. If anyone wants to go on it, it's the livingrent.org.uk, and we've done a lot of lobbying, and we've got a petition, 3,000 names. And in Scotland they've abolished the right to buy, which I think we should all be looking at.
First off, I wouldn't quite say that the purpose of a movement is directly to influence the Labour Party. I think the purpose of the movement is whatever the movement wants it to be, and that's for people within it to, have out within the movement. In terms of how do movements come about, I think Newham is a really good example. In Newham, it's not just Focus E15, there's other amazing campaigns like Friends of Queen's Market, there's the Bowling 100, which is trying to fight the replacement of Upton Park football ground, West Ham's football ground, with all luxury apartments. There's the There's the Upton Park Community Centre, which is a community centre for the Hindu community that was shut down, and they're starting to get organised, and they're coming down, and all of us are going to each other's events, and we're becoming, becoming acquainted with each other. We know each other. Clapton Football Club, which is like a small non-league team, and the supportive base are all anti-fascist, and we're all, like knowing each other on a very, friendly, close basis. And that's how, we don't need necessarily to be looking somewhere else, like who is going to lead us. We can make these connections amongst ourselves very easily. We're doing it right now. I'm coming and I'm meeting you, and we can, we can make these real connections like ourselves. And that's happening in you. It is happening, and I think that is possibly the beginning of a London-wide movement that we're seeing coming out of East London. So.
My name's Julie. I'm newly elected councillor at Brighton Hove Council 3 weeks ago now, I think. We've now got 23 Labour councillors, and although we have a majority, it's not an overall majority, so we've got a very difficult job ahead of us. And housing is one of the biggest problems that we face in Brighton Hove. And of course, the biggest problem we've got is land, and the fact we don't have the sites. We've got the downs, we've got the sea. And we have so few sites, and there's so much opposition to building up. And then there's opposition when you have sites set aside for student housing. So as a new Labour councillor and also as a planner, that's what I do in my day job, if you like. I totally 100% agree with you about house building being one of the drivers of the economy. It always has been in the past, and it should be now. And yeah, we've got all these tools, which I know that administration will be looking into, like the borrowing and so on. But it's a question of where do we build them, and that's it's not an observation really, just to say how difficult it is for us in Brighton and Hove. Thank you.
I had a few points that were related to the discussion before the break, which I guess most of this is, but in terms of like stuff to do with policy or what we should be calling for, whoever we might be. I think that obviously building more homes is really important. It always is. There's always a growing population wherever you are in the world, but I think it's often used by any party as a way to sort of blind or to distract from another major issue, which is also more immediate in terms of solving the problem for people, which is, and again it has been touched on, but the massive amount of empty homes there are. It must probably be the same here, but certainly massive scale in London, enough to home everyone that is in housing need at the moment or homeless. And they might be private properties that are sitting empty, but a lot of them are also council properties sitting empty or being decanted, waiting for development. So I think that has to be continually raised and continually in everybody's minds, because apart from anything else, they're there right now, and people that are in desperate need could be living in them. And that was one of our major fights with carpenters, because that was on our doorstep. There were 400 empty homes sitting there, while literally day by day families were being sent out of Newham, despite the fact that Newham denied that going on. But the figures are there. There was an independent article out which had figures, and Newham was the third worst offending borough. It was something like over 100 families in 3 months had been sent out of the borough. So that's all I'd say. Obviously the housing bill is really important, but you can run into difficulties which has happened in the past, so you wouldn't want to repeat the kind of factory build, and then it became all privatised and a lot of stuff went wrong, they were shoddily built and all that kind of stuff. So everything has to be really carefully thought about, especially when we've got really decent council and other housing stock sitting empty. I mean, you mentioned it as well, but I think that people owning more than one property and making money out of that has to be seriously taxed and made not profitable, and I mean it's probably beyond what I can speak about in terms of economics and policy making, but that is a massive issue, and people obviously are still raking it in and are not being stopped. I think the whole use of the word social housing has already taken you a step away from council housing. I think the language of it is incredibly important. All I ever hear Labour MPs talking about, they barely mention social housing. You're lucky if they say that word. And they talk about mixed income, they talk about all this stuff, which in the end only means the quota of affordable and genuinely affordable council goes down and down as the building process goes on. And also, ideology-wise, it has shifted into everybody needs to own their own home. And yes, in this current situation, everybody does, or they feel they need to, because there are no such thing as secure tenancies anymore. But we should be fighting for council homes being for everyone and being about decent housing and a right, and that renting could be a much more sustainable and a much more affordable thing for people if it was properly managed, rather than this desperate need that everybody should be on the property ladder. I just think that we need that shift.
Yeah, it does.
Germany, places like that.
Germany it does, yeah.
And then, I mean, I must say, I've grown up being aware of politics. I've grown up as a socialist, and the Labour Party is always who you look to, even however, you know, I grew up during New Labour. I was never under any illusions that they were a genuinely socialist party, but I find it increasingly difficult to galvanise anyone over speaking about voting for a Labour Party. Obviously within it, in these little internal things, there are people fighting hard for change and through the unions and all sorts of stuff, but we have to like seriously debate and see what the future is, because in Newham it's unbelievable the Labour MP, Lynn Brown, how angry and defensive, and immediately she is on the attack with people that are coming to her for the first time, their first interaction with politics, and this is what they're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are covering their backs the whole time. They are in businesses' pockets. They are interested in private development. They say it brings work, it brings jobs. Working families, that's all you ever hear.
Oh God,
It's so unbelievably out of touch that I find it very difficult from the outside or from a broader view to see the future for the party. Obviously the party is also how we fight that, how we don't just lose people, because it's extreme. It's really extreme what's going on, and we have to remember that. That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry I ranted for a long time, but you know, and that's where it comes back to the street stall, the day-to-day fights for people, and the direct action that has to take place, because you can't rely on the traditional routes. They achieve nothing. Yeah.
Why aren't we building tower blocks? Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect the answer is that there were quite a lot of tower blocks on council estates built after the war, and often with this rather tacky construction in order to achieve very large figures. But it's become extremely unpopular, as one can well imagine. I mean, to live, you know, on the 18th floor, along with 6 other people on your level, and 18 times 6 people below you, is, I would be, my response would be, why are other countries accepting this? Because
you know why we don't want to live in tower block? Because tower blocks here are shit. Sorry for
Yeah, I agree with that one.
In a place like Spain, of course, there are cheap tower blocks. There are somewhat nicer tower blocks. There are very, very nice tower blocks. You see. So it is a case, for some reason, the only tower blocks that you see here are the council houses that were done in the cheapest possible way, with the thinnest possible walls, where you hear all your neighbors. So, you know, my question is, why do you only see that?
go on.
I think also, you know, there's also a system of social chauvinism in this country, that working class people are chavs. If they live in a tower block, they're a criminal. They're a lazy, like benefits claiming doll scum. That exists in this country. People think that. That's a common opinion now, you know, amongst people, because this is the level of, you know, basically cultural hegemony that they have in this country. The people at the top have in this country. They can convince people that your neighbour that lives in a tower block is crap, and you shouldn't want to live in a tower block. You should aspire to be one of the people who lives in the big house. you know, we have a system of individualism, and that makes people, you know, look down on other people because of their situations and the place they live in. That's part of what we need to be fighting about. You know, people's mentality is completely skewed by the system.